Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruel thing my wife did was text me, "Don't try coming to the family reunion," like I was a stranger who needed permission to exist around her people. She didn't call. She didn't explain. She didn't soften it. Just a blunt message that erased me in one line, after years of me showing up, paying in, and swallowing insults to keep the peace. Here's how it happened. I'm Everett Cole, and for most of my marriage, I believed love meant being steady even when it wasn't celebrated. My wife, Maricela Knox, came from a tight, loud, proud family in Prince George's County, Maryland, the kind that had matching shirts at cookouts and inside jokes that had been alive longer than I had. When we first met in Baltimore, Maricela seemed like the warm center of every room. She was organized, charming, and quick with a smile that made people trust her. I was quieter, the guy who listened more than he spoke. We balanced each other in the beginning. She said she liked that I did not compete with her. The first time I noticed the way her family watched me. We were dating, and I brought dessert to her aunt's townhouse in Landover. Her uncle looked me up and down and asked what I did for work like it was a background check. When I told him I was a project manager for a logistics company, he nodded like he was unimpressed with the concept of stability. Maricela squeezed my hand under the table and acted like it was harmless. "They're protective," she whispered. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that being consistent would eventually earn me a real seat in the family, not the folding chair near the doorway. We got married in a small ceremony near the Inner Harbor, with a reception room full of relatives who toasted us with smiles that did not reach their eyes. Maricela looked stunning, and I remember thinking that whatever awkwardness existed would soften once we were officially family. It did not soften. It sharpened. Her mother, Bernice Knox, had a way of speaking that sounded polite until you replayed it later and realized it was a quiet insult. She would say, "Everett, you're so simple," then laugh like she meant uncomplicated, not limited. Maricela rarely corrected her. If I brought it up later, she would sigh and tell me I was too sensitive. She did not say it with cruelty at first. She said it like a spouse who was tired after a long day. But the message landed the same. My discomfort was an inconvenience. When we bought our home in Ellicott City, I thought that would finally anchor us. The place was not fancy, but it was bright and clean with a backyard big enough for a grill and a small garden. I handled the mortgage process, the inspections, the paperwork, and the budgeting. Maricela loved the outcome and hated the details. "You're good at the boring stuff," she said, kissing my cheek while I sorted documents at the kitchen table. I took it as a compliment. I did not yet understand how easily people can benefit from your strengths while disrespecting you at the same time. Maricela's family came over often, especially on Sundays. They would critique the food, the music, the furniture arrangement, and my tone when I greeted them. If I was too quiet, I was stiff. If I tried to joke, I was doing too much. Either way, I never quite got it right. The worst part was how Maricela changed around them. At home, she could be affectionate, even playful. Around her mother and cousins, she acted like my presence was optional. She would interrupt me mid-sentence and redirect the conversation as if I had spoken out of turn. I tried to talk about it calmly. I did not yell. I did not threaten. I would say, "When you cut me off like that, it makes me feel small." She would roll her eyes and say, "This is why they don't like you. You always make things about you." That sentence became a pattern. If I was hurt, I was selfish. If I wanted respect, I was controlling. If I asked for basic partnership, I was needy. Maricela had a talent for turning my requests into accusations. Still, I stayed. I stayed because I loved the woman she was when we were alone. I stayed because I thought marriage meant endurance. I stayed because I did not want to become another story her family told at reunions about a man who could not handle their daughter. The reunion became the biggest stage for all of it. Every summer, her extended family rented a park pavilion in Bowie, with tables lined in aluminum trays and coolers filled with drinks. There were speeches, games, photos, and an unspoken hierarchy that Maricela seemed desperate to climb. The first reunion after we married, I arrived early to help set up. I carried folding chairs, assembled the canopy, and ran errands when they ran out of ice. Bernice watched me work and said, "At least he's useful," like I was a tool, not a person. I laughed it off because I did not want to be the tense husband. Maricela did not defend me. She smiled at her mother like it was normal. Later that night, when I told her a hurt, she replied, "You are too old to be this fragile." Over time, the reunions stopped being family events and started feeling like annual evaluations. I could feel eyes on me when I walked up. I could hear the small laughs when I stepped away. I learned to keep my expressions neutral so I would not give them anything to talk about. Then my job changed. Our company expanded, and I was offered a bigger role with better pay and more responsibility. It was a kind of jump I had worked for quietly for years. I was proud. I thought Maricela would be proud too. She congratulated me, but something in her face shifted. It was not happiness. It looked more like calculation. She asked how much the raise was, how my benefits changed, whether I could make some upgrades around the house. Her excitement attached itself to the money, not the milestone. Around that same time, Maricela started spending more time with her cousin Taylor Knox, who lived in Silver Spring and had a circle of friends who were always working on something. Talon's parties had business talk, photography, and people who called themselves consultants without explaining what they consulted on. Maricela began dressing differently for those events. More polished, more deliberate. She would post photos, smiling with Talon and friends while I sat at home, eating dinner alone. If I asked why I was not invited, she would say, "It's not your vibe." I noticed a new name popping up in her text when her phone lit on the counter, Dorian Ricks. At first I told myself it was a co-worker. Then I saw the way she angled her screen away from me, the way she took calls on the back porch, the way she turned affectionate only when she wanted something. One night, she came home late and walked straight past me without a greeting. I asked gently, "Everything okay?" She answered without stopping, "I'm tired." Don't start. I had not started anything. I had asked a basic question. Her impatience felt rehearsed. Weeks later, I found a receipt in her car for a hotel in National Harbor. It was folded carefully in the console, like someone had forgotten it on purpose. When I asked about it, she did not deny it. She stared at me and said, "I needed space. You suffocate me." I said, "Space doesn't require a hotel." She shrugged. "I'm not doing this with you. You always twist things." That was her new move. Refuse the conversation, then blame me for bringing it up. No remorse, no accountability, just dismissal. I started sleeping lighter. I started noticing more. The unexplained charges, the new perfume, the way she seemed annoyed by the sound of my key in the door. The house we bought together began to feel like a place I was tolerated, not welcomed. The breaking point was not the hotel receipt. It was the way she used her family as a weapon. Whenever she wanted to punish me, she would mention them. "My mother agrees with me. My cousins think you're insecure. My aunt says I settled." She collected their opinions like stones to throw at me. I tried marriage counseling. I booked the appointment. I sat in the waiting room alone. Maricela texted, "Not coming." Waste of time. I sat through the session anyway, staring at a box of tissues I refused to touch, feeling embarrassed in a quiet room that smelled like lavender. The counselor asked what I wanted. I said I wanted partnership, respect, and honesty. I said I wanted my wife to stop punishing me for caring. When I heard myself say it out loud, I realized how long I had been negotiating for basic decency. The reunion approached again, and Maricela became unusually focused on appearances. She ordered matching outfits online. She talked about photos. She mentioned that Talon was bringing important people this year. She did not say their names, but she smiled in a way that made my stomach tighten. A week before the reunion, Bernice came over unexpectedly. She walked through my living room like she owned it, pausing to criticize the curtains. Maricela followed her like a shadow. I offered coffee. Bernice declined like the offer was beneath her. Bernice sat at my kitchen table and said, "Everett, I'm going to be direct. This family does not like confusion. We like clarity. And right now, my daughter's future needs clarity." She said it as if my marriage was a business meeting and I was the problem on the agenda. I asked what she meant. Bernice looked at Maricela, then back at me. "We need to know what you bring. We need to know what happens if this ends. We don't want my daughter struggling because she chose wrong." She said, chose wrong while sitting in my house. Maricela did not protest. She did not say, "That's my husband." She did not say, "Don't talk to him like that." She stared at her nails and let her mother speak for her, as if she agreed and did not want to say it herself. After Bernice left, I asked Maricela, "Did you put her up to that?" She laughed once, short and sharp. "You act like my mother is some villain." She's right. We do need clarity. You're always acting wounded instead of proving yourself. Proving myself to who? I asked. To your family? To you. Maricela folded her arms. If you have to ask, you're not a leader. That word, leader, hung between us like a verdict. I realized she had stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as a prop. 2 days later, I came home from work and found a printed packet on the counter. It was a proposed post-nuptial agreement, filled with language about assets, obligations, and separate property. My name was spelled wrong in 2 places. The arrogance of it made my throat burn. I asked where it came from. Maricela said, "My uncle knows a lawyer. It's standard." I scanned the pages and saw how one-sided it was. It protected her, her family, and anything tied to them, while leaving me exposed. I looked up and said no. She did not argue. She smiled like I had confirmed something she wanted to believe. "Fine," she said. "Then don't be surprised when people move accordingly." She said people, but she meant her family. She meant the machine I had been feeding with my patience. That night, I slept in the guest room. I did not do it to punish her. I did it because I could not stand beside someone who treated my consent like an obstacle. I stared at the ceiling and realized I had been trying to earn safety from someone who benefited from my insecurity. The next morning, I took a personal day and drove to Towson. Not to confront anyone, not to beg. I went because I needed to stop being naive. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney recommended by a coworker, a calm woman named Imani Weaver. Imani did not hype me up. She did not tell me to burn my life down. She asked careful questions. What accounts existed? What property was in whose name? What documents had been signed? What emails or messages prove patterns? She listened like she had heard stories like mine too many times. I told her about the reunion pressure, the post-nut packet, the hotel receipt, the way Maricela used her family to corner me. I told her about the things I paid for and the way my contributions were minimized. When I finished, I felt ashamed that I had tolerated it. Imani said, "You can't control her behavior, but you can control your legal exposure. People who treat you like you're disposable often assume you will stay generous while they plan your exit. Your job is to stop funding that assumption." She asked if Maricela was listed on my benefits at work. I said yes because I thought that was what married people did. I had a large employer-sponsored life insurance policy, a retirement account, and a supplemental benefit program I barely thought about because it felt distant. Imani nodded. Beneficiary designations are separate from wills. They override many other documents. If your marriage is unstable and your spouse is openly hostile, you should consider whether you still want her position to benefit from you in a crisis. Her tone stayed practical, not dramatic. I asked what changing it would mean. She said, "It means you decide who receives what you built, instead of leaving it to someone who is actively pushing you out. That choice can be private. You do not have to announce it." I left her office with a folder and a strange sense of calm. It was not joy. It was clear. I drove to a quiet parking lot, opened my work benefits portal on my phone, and stared at the screen for a long time before touching anything. My finger hovered over the beneficiary section. Maricela's name sat there like an assumption I had never challenged. I thought about the way she dismissed me, the way she let her mother talk to me like a defective product, the way she refused counseling without discussion. I thought about the reunion text that had not yet come, but I could feel it approaching. I thought about the post-nut packet on my counter with my misspelled name. I realized how reckless it was to keep leaving my future in the hands of someone who kept proving she did not value me. I updated one document, my beneficiary designation. I did not do anything illegal. I did not hide marital assets. I followed the rules my employer set, the same rules everyone used. I changed the primary beneficiary for my spouse to a revocable trust, one created for myself, with my younger sister Nicole as trustee. The trust was simple, designed to protect me, cover obligations, and distribute what was mine according to terms that could not be weaponized. It was not about punishing Maricela. It was about ending her access to a future she kept threatening to take from me anyway. When I hit submit, I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt something close to relief, like I had finally locked a door that should have been locked all along. I sat in my car, breathing slowly, listening to the hum of traffic, realizing how long I had been living on emotional probation. 2 days later, the reunion text arrived. It came while I was in a meeting at work. My phone buzzed, and I glanced down. Don't try coming to the family reunion. No punctuation beyond the period. No explanation. Just a rejection delivered like a scheduling update. My chest tightened anyway. Even when you expect cruelty, it still cuts. I stepped into the hallway, called Maricela, and she did not pick up. I texted back, "Why are you doing this?" She replied, "Because you embarrass me. Stay home." I stared at the words until my eyes stung. I had carried chairs, paid for rentals, driven long distances, bought food, and smiled through insults. I had shown up for her family like it was my responsibility, and she reduced me to an embarrassment with 2 sentences. That evening, Maricela came home wearing a bright dress, hair perfect, perfume sharp and unfamiliar. She walked past me, tossed her keys into a bowl, and said, "Don't make this a thing." Her voice was calm, almost bored, like she had already moved on. I asked, "Are you really telling me I'm not allowed to attend with my wife?" She looked at me and said, "It's my family, not yours. You don't fit, and I'm tired of pretending you do." No remorse, no flicker of regret, just blunt ownership of the cruelty. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I did not shout. I did not beg. I nodded once, slowly, because I realized something. If she could exile me that easily, she had been rehearsing this in her head for a long time. The next morning, she left early to help with setup. I stayed home, not because I accepted humiliation, but because I refused to perform desperation in front of people who enjoyed it. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and sat on the edge of our bed staring at the indentation her body left behind. Around noon, my phone lit up with a photo from Taylor's social media story. It was the pavilion in Bowie, packed with relatives. Maricela stood front and center, smiling hard, wearing the outfit she had ordered for us. Her arm was linked with Dorian Ricks. Seeing that image did something to me that words cannot fully capture. It was not just betrayal. It was a replacement. She had dressed him in my place and presented him like an upgrade, surrounded by people who had always hoped she would choose someone else. I stared until my hands shook, then I set the phone down and walked outside. The sun was bright. The neighborhood was quiet. A man across the street washed his car, minding his own life. I stood on my porch and realized I was watching my marriage turn into a performance for an audience that hated me. That night, Maricela returned late, cheerful in a way that felt cruel. She carried leftover trays and laughed while she told a story about a cousin falling during a race. She did not mention Dorian, but she did not have to. Her silence was its own statement. I asked, "Was he there?" She blinked slowly, like my question was annoying. "Yes," she said, "and he's not fragile." That's refreshing. She spoke like she was describing a product feature. Then she walked upstairs and shut the bedroom door. I slept on the couch again. I did not scroll for evidence. I did not demand explanations. I sat in the dark and realized my suffering had become part of her comfort. She liked having me available to fund stability while she chased excitement and approval elsewhere. Over the next week, Maricela started moving with more confidence, like she believed she had already won. She stopped buying groceries and started eating out. She began taking phone calls in the driveway. Bernice visited more often, looking around the house with the expression of someone inspecting inventory. One evening, Bernice said, "Maricela deserves a man who can stand in a room without needing a therapist afterward." Maricela laughed. I did not. I looked at both of them and realized there was no version of me that would earn their respect because they did not want to respect me. I called Imani Weaver again. I told her about the reunion photo and the way Maricela was parading Dorian around. I told her I felt like I was dissolving inside my own home. Imani said, "Now you act strategically, quietly. You document. You protect yourself. She told me to keep communication in writing. She told me to secure copies of financial records. She told me to stop paying for extras that were not necessary. She told me to avoid dramatic confrontations because people like Maricela use your emotions as proof that you are unstable. The hardest part was loneliness. When your spouse turns your in-laws into a jury, you stop feeling like a person. You feel like a case file. I went to work each day smiling because my job required it, then came home to a woman who treated me like a problem she had solved. Maricela began mentioning divorce in casual ways. "If we split, you'll be fine," she said one night, sipping tea like it was a weather report. "You like being alone anyway." The audacity made my throat tighten. I said, "You're talking like this is already done." She shrugged. "Maybe it is." Then she added, "My mother said you won't fight. She said you're the type who just disappears." She sounded amused. Her family had reduced my pain into a prediction. I did not disappear. I started preparing. I took photos of account statements. I downloaded mortgage records. I saved the post-nuptial packet. I saved screenshots of the reunion story with timestamps. I kept everything organized, not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done being treated like my reality could be rewritten. Maricela noticed my calm and misread it. She thought my silence meant defeat. She became bolder. She stopped wearing her ring. She started leaving overnight with cousins. She did not bother to create believable excuses anymore because she no longer believed she owed me respect. One Saturday morning, she told me she was going to a brunch in Washington, D.C. with Talon and friends. She dressed carefully and walked out without looking back. I sat at the kitchen table, stared at the sunlight on the tile, and felt a strange quiet settle into me. That quiet was not numbness. It was focused. I realized I had spent years trying to prove I deserved kindness. Now I needed to make sure I would not be financially punished for staying loyal to someone who treated loyalty like weakness. 2 weeks later, Maricela served me divorce papers at the front door. Bernice stood behind her in the driveway, arms crossed like a security guard. Maricela's face was calm. She said, "Don't act shocked. This is better for both of us." No remorse. No apology. Nothing. I took the envelope, nodded, and went back inside. My hand shook when I opened it, not because I did not expect it, but because it made everything real. The paperwork claimed I was emotionally controlling and socially disruptive, as if being hurt by disrespect was a crime. Maricela moved out 2 days later, not to be alone, but to move in with Dorian in Hyattsville. Bernice helped her pack, calling out which items were hers like she was dividing spoils. Maricela walked through the house, pointing at furniture I paid for and saying, "That's coming with me." I did not block the doorway. I did not shout. I simply said, "Take what you believe you're entitled to. We'll handle the rest through attorneys." My voice stayed even. Maricela looked disappointed, like she wanted a scene she could narrate as my downfall. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. The silence hurt, but it also felt clean. I sat on the living room floor that night, surrounded by missing furniture, and realized I'd been holding my breath in my own life. The divorce process moved fast because Maricela and Bernice wanted quick control. They filed motions early. They demanded financial disclosures. They acted confident, like the story was already written. I would pay, Maricela would collect, and her family would celebrate. Then the first surprise landed. During one of the early exchanges, Maricela's attorney requested confirmation of my employer benefits, including survivor benefits and beneficiary designations. They expected to see her name. They expected it because most people never change those forms. When my attorney responded with documentation showing my beneficiary designation had been updated weeks before the reunion, I did not hear about it immediately. I was sitting at my desk at work when my phone buzzed repeatedly. It was Maricela calling. I let it ring. Then she texted, "What did you do?" Her next message, "You had no right." Her next, "Fix it." I stared at the screen and felt the shape of her panic through the words. It was the first time in a long time that she sounded uncertain. I responded once, "My benefits are my decision." That was all. I did not insult her. I did not explain. I did not argue. I refused to let her drag me back into the emotional courtroom where she always played judge. Maricela called again. And when I answered, she did not sound heartbroken. She sounded furious. "You're trying to ruin me," she said. I said, "You removed me from your family like I was disposable. You still don't get to claim my future." "It's not about that," she snapped. "It's about what I'm owed." That word, owed, hit me harder than any insult. She was not grieving the marriage. She was calculating the payout. I said, calmly, "You're not owed access to me." Then I ended the call. My hands were steady when I put the phone down. My chest still hurt, but it was the hurt of someone finally choosing himself, not the hurt of someone begging to be chosen. The next twist came from something Maricela did not expect: financial scrutiny. Because Maricela pushed so hard for support and claims of marital contribution, the process forced a deeper look at spending and transfers. My attorney asked for records of large expenses and unexplained withdrawals. The statements showed patterns I had suspected but never confirmed. Transfers to accounts I did not recognize. Purchases in D.C. on nights she claimed she was with cousins. Payments tied to Dorian's business. It was not just betrayal. It was an extraction. When confronted, Maricela did not apologize. She did not even deny it cleanly. She said, "You make enough. You don't notice. Stop acting like a victim." Her indifference was chilling. She had convinced herself that using me was justified. That is when karma started moving faster. Because those transfers mattered. In a divorce, money spent on an affair can be considered marital waste in many situations, and the evidence was organized, dated, and clear. Maricela's confidence shifted into irritation, then into fear. Bernice tried to intervene. She called me from an unknown number and said, "A real man would correct his mistake and handle this privately." I said, "We are handling it privately. Through attorneys." She snapped, "You're trying to embarrass my daughter." "No," I said, "Your daughter embarrassed me publicly. I'm just refusing to fund it." Bernice went quiet for a moment, then hissed, "You think you're smart." I replied, "I think I'm done." Then I hung up. Maricela did not like losing narrative control. She began telling relatives I had changed, that I was cold, that I was vindictive. People who never asked how I was doing suddenly had opinions about my character. I stopped reading them. I stopped trying to correct them. My private transformation started in small ways. I started eating real meals again. I started sleeping through the night without waking to check where my wife was. I started going to the gym early, not to become someone new, but to return to myself. I also started protecting my peace at home. I changed locks legally after Maricela moved out. I installed a simple camera at the door. I kept my living room clean. I bought a new couch, not expensive, but mine. It felt like reclaiming space without making a speech about it. Meanwhile, Maricela's life with Dorian began showing cracks. That part came to me indirectly through the same family members who once dismissed me. They did not apologize, but their tone shifted. I heard phrases like, "He's not who we thought," and "She's stressed." I did not celebrate it. I just observed it. People like Maricela often mistake new attention for stability. When the excitement fades, they realize they traded reliability for performance, and performance has limits. The most satisfying moment was not a public humiliation. It was a quiet meeting in a conference room where the numbers spoke louder than anyone's pride. During settlement discussions, Maricela's side pushed for a larger portion of my retirement and benefits. My attorney calmly explained what was marital, what was separate, and what was no longer positioned to benefit Maricela in the way she assumed. The beneficiary designation change did not erase marital rights where they legally applied, but it removed her from the easy, automatic safety net she expected. Maricela stared at the documents like she could intimidate paper. Bernice was not there, but her influence was visible in the aggressive posture of Maricela's demands. When the reality became clear, Maricela's face tightened. She did not look sad. She looked insulted. "So you planned this," she said. My attorney answered for me. He protected himself after being excluded and threatened with an unfair agreement. He acted within his rights. The room stayed quiet. Maricela's anger had nowhere to land because it was not a debate. It was documentation. The settlement shifted. The transfers tied to Dorian became part of the conversation. The purchases, the hotel charges, the unusual withdrawals. Maricella's attorney stopped acting casual. Maricella's confidence turned into tight-lipped silence. Even then, she did not apologize. She never once said, "I'm sorry for what I did." She did not say, "I handled it wrong." She only said, "This is unfair," as if consequences were a personal attack instead of the natural end of disrespect. The final outcome compensated me the way my endurance never did. Maricela had to account for the money diverted during the marriage. The equity division reflected reality instead of her fantasy. I kept the benefits I built and protected. I walked away with the kind of financial stability she tried to treat like her inheritance. The day the papers were finalized, I did not announce it online. I did not call anyone to brag. I went home, sat in my quiet living room, and stared at the sunlight on the floor like it was new. I realized I'd spent years being punished for being dependable. A month later, I sold the house and moved into a smaller place in Columbia, Maryland, closer to my job and farther from the orbit of her family. I bought furniture slowly. I decorated with intention. I made coffee in the morning without fear of being accused of breathing wrong. My success stayed private, exactly how I wanted it. I put more into savings. I invested carefully. I took a short trip alone to Charleston, South Carolina, and walked near the water in silence, letting my mind settle without anyone telling me I was too sensitive. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Maricela and Dorian did not last. The details did not matter to me. What mattered was the pattern. She tried to build a life on disrespect and image does not pay bills when the spotlight moves on. Bernice never called to apologize. Talon never acknowledged the reunion photo. Maricela never admitted she used her family as a blade. They did not need to. Their lack of remorse only confirmed that I made the right choice by protecting myself without asking them to understand. Sometimes I still think about that reunion text, how it landed like a door slammed in my face. It hurt, but also woke me up. Because if someone can exile you with one sentence, they have already decided you are not human to them in the way you deserve. Updating that one document did not make me cruel. It made me responsible. It did not make me vengeful. It made me careful. It did not erase the grief of losing a marriage, but it ensured the grief did not come with financial ruin attached to it. The last time Maricela texted me was months after everything ended. It was not an apology. It was a complaint about something minor in the paperwork. I read it, felt nothing, and forwarded it to my attorney. Then I put my phone down and went back to my life. I learned that peace is not loud. It does not need witnesses. It does not need a speech. It is waking up in a clean home where no one is waiting to belittle you, where your name is safe, where your future is not treated like a prize someone can claim after humiliating you. And the part that still amazes me is how simple the turning point was. She texted me like I was disposable. I didn't fight for a seat at a table built on disrespect. I didn't beg to be accepted by people who enjoyed excluding me. I just updated one document and let reality do what my pleading never could. If that outcome felt satisfying, subscribe, because the next story is even colder and even more realistic. And comment, documents don't lie, if you believe the best revenge is quiet, legal, and permanent. The end.